Hi there, everybody. So this is my highly personal and probably individualistic attempt to rough out some of the things that I think are fairly common when it comes to applying for jobs. So I'm going to talk about 6 points, which I think will be here. So really you can see pretty straightforward, job season, every job, dream job, writing the CV, letter of application, interview, what happens in COVID. And I looked earlier on the TES job site, roughly 149 French jobs, 136 Spanish, German, Chinese, 2 within 100 miles of London, but 189 worldwide being advertised on the website. So obviously this session is being recorded, but I think the one screen I will leave on is the final screen, which are some things to think about on an interview. And they're not interview questions, because I think that's not particularly helpful to the people interviewing you. But these are things that it would be as well to probably make up your mind about, and they're fairly standard. So first one of my 6 then is there a job season? And the answer is absolutely yes. And pretty much for heads, there is a year lead time in terms of going for a job. Could be more than a year. Heads of department is probably a couple of terms. And for, if you like, a standard teacher, that's really going to kick off in the 2nd week of January. So it started. And it's as well to know that there is a rough season for this, and that is dictated by giving notice in a school. So if you're in a state school, the norm is to give half a term's notice. So if you're going to change jobs, you have to have given notice by the end of the summer half term. If you're in an independent school, that is usually a term's notice. So you have to have given notice by the end of the Lent term. So what does that mean? That means independent schools, if you're after that job, I would look at both sectors, tend to be slightly earlier the inverted commas season than state school jobs. So generally that doesn't mean, say, there won't be any jobs available. There will be jobs right up to the beginning of September and probably after that, and a pepper of sickness leave, maternity leave covers, etc. throughout the year. But the recognised season for your first main job is going to be 2nd week of January, and there's going to be a time then for a closing date on that. It could be quite sharpish. So now is a really good time to look at it, and you need to be on top of that. So what does that mean? That means look at the TES job site, and that's probably the single best place to look for a job. I would be very wary of using an agency for a job that is going to have a lot of applicants. Our interview process, and fairly standard, to discourage the dear sir or madam approach, is to make you answer particular questions, and it's relatively laborious. And I suppose that is just the market saying, people are just banging off an application and we've got to read through hundreds and we really want the best person. And that's actually increasingly hard to do and time consuming if we're going to do it fairly. Next thing then, the second of my 6 points is, should you apply for every job that comes up in the TS? Oh, sorry, one thing I ought to say about the TS, it has a very useful distance function. Put in your postcode and you can then look at distance. Beware of that because geographers will tell you a good word, isochrones, and that is that for commuting, distance is measured in time. A commute is measured in time, not in distance. So in my school, if you happen to, we have kids coming from North London because the rail and bus links happen to work really well. And so it's much more common, in fact, that kids come from North London than it is from West London, because that's actually a really tough commute. So be really sensible. And are you sure you want that dream job with over an hour's commute? So for our school, standard commute is often 40 minutes to an hour. Yeah, but if you're doing that pile of books, yeah, you sure you want to go there? So be sensible. there may not be in the first year or any year the dream job within a certain radius. So my second point then, should you apply for every job or just the dream job? I think my advice would be, if you waited for the dream job, you will be probably more stressed because it's important to you, and probably give a less convincing interview. And often people do a very good interview in jobs they don't really want, which often they then turn out to quite want. However, if you think of how much effort there is in applying for jobs, that's a real pain. You cannot be spending all of your time filling in job applications and not marking books. So I would target some. I really would recommend applying for some jobs. You will know what you're roughly like, or have a chat to your tutor, to your schools in teaching practice. What sort of job do you think I might go for? Frankly, your best chance of a job is probably in the school that you're doing your teaching practice in. They get to see you, you get to see them, and it's got to work on both things. So really, I would apply for some jobs just to get used to doing it. The other thing is, it will make you write your CV. It will make you write a letter of application. Those will need to be tweaked for each job. Otherwise, it will just look generic. It may strike you as strange, but actually schools care more about getting the right person for a job than you do about getting the job. So unless there's absolutely nothing left in the larder, just think about it from a school's point of view. So if a school appoints the right appointment, in modern languages, kids enjoy it, numbers go up, exam results are better. Yeah, if you're not the right person for whatever reason and it's not working out, the absolute duty has to be for that department to try and save you. What are they going to do to help you get it right? Honestly, if you think you're going to go into your first job and you're going to teach like a genius, frankly, unless you're a saint, you're not going to make it. There's still things I cannot teach years on. I still, sorry, Stephen, every year I set myself the task of teaching something by song, and it never works. And I can play the cello, so I can play electric bass, but I just cannot teach a decent song lesson. And I know how important it is. They use a great bit of language. Say, well, where do you get that from? And so did this in class to remember the song. And I just can't tap into that. So don't think that there's good some, you finish your PGC, you skip whatever. If you think every day is going to be, poppies in meadows, think again there. So really, yeah, okay. So stressful. I think that's the point I was on. I was talking about schools really wanting you. If that person isn't getting it right, and I can't help them, I'm going to have to chronicle, because it's only fair to do that, why this isn't working. So it's going to take up a huge amount of my time, in fairness, to chronicle, firstly, to try and help the person, secondly, to chronicle why it isn't working. And all the times the kid's not getting experience, GCSE A-level choices are coming up, and there are clouds on the horizon. So boy, I really, really want to appoint the right person. And we spend an awful lot of time looking at CVs, reading through, interviewing people, because honestly, it'll knock your department back for a good part of a year, if not a year or longer, in terms of reputation in a sadly subject in difficulties. So you want the cash, you want the job, you want to get started, but boy, we really want to get the right person. Moving on then to my third point, which is writing the CV. Okay, let's do that from two ways. If you're a career changer, I'm only interested in what you have done that is entirely transferable to teaching, and I want to see that as being something obvious. If you just took your old CV, and tweaked it a bit, it's going to bore the pants off me, and that's not going to work. And with people who maybe have had a less extended career, I want to know the things you've done and why. Help me see why that's relevant to stuff that you're going to do in the classroom. I would really, if you're doing it on paper, I would really think hard about going anything over 2 sides of A4. Why? Because if you can't tell me the story on 2 sides of A4, you're going to bore the pants off kids. Yeah, I don't want to know everything that you've done in your life, except from a safeguarding point of view. Then I really, really do, and it's going to be HR. And if there are gaps in a CV, that's just naive on your part. That is going to have to be there. If you've been abroad for significant chunks of time, it's as well to get that certificate of good conduct, because that is coming your way, and it's better at interview say, yeah, I've got those, rather than I haven't got those. So CV, only relevant stuff, 2 sides of A4, and I mean a decent readable font size for those reasons. Next one, letter of application. I was deeply saddened a number of years ago to see that a London course was giving people a sample letter of application, and their justification was, if this is a letter that will tend to get you a good return, so at least you get to interview. I think that is entirely unfair, and from my point of view, and I hope from other point of view, there is an absolute deal breaker here, that if the letter of application is not the person who turns up at interview, you in effect, strong word, lied to us. And if you lied to us to get the job, what are you going to do in a profession where you have a large amount of time on your own with young people? So that is a real alarm bell thing. I've bizarrely done some interviewing for Chinese, and if the teacher comes up and cannot speak English well enough to communicate with kids in corridor, to write reports, to deal with difficult parents, that can't work in our school. It may work in some schools. They may be a great teacher, but that is a real problem. And that letter of application, whatever it is, has got to be you. On the whole, I would write less rather than more. So again, I'm talking in paper terms, but if you can think of a normal length, I might have for a normal modern languages post between 80 and 120 applications. I'm going to read all of them really pretty carefully. My way of doing it is to divide them into 4 piles. Frankly, half of those are not going to be for us. Could be good elsewhere, not going to be for us. There's a best pile of 20, 25, and there's going to be another pile of 25 in case it doesn't work out. Of those 25, we are going to call 6, maybe 7, probably 6 to interview. And those applications are going to be read in detail by 3 of us and by 7 of us in total. So that just tells you how much time we're prepared to put in to making sure we get the right person for the right job. So that letter of application really, it's got to be you. There's some extremely good advice on the TES, and frankly, I don't think I could do better. It's all the things to avoid. If you are doing, as occasionally happens in people who are applying for our skit course, if you're doing the kind of corporate, I want your job in 5 years stuff, I'm going to be, driving a Ferrari, you're probably missing your vacation. And that doesn't play well with pretty much anybody in a school. Yeah, if you want a shed load of cash, bar selling drugs to kids, it's just not, it's not going to work. You're in the wrong job, cut and run now. So that letter of application has got to be you. There's some good there. I'll put that in the last but one slide. I think the link I'm giving you is extremely good. If I move on to the interview, there are lots of different formats, and there'll be a COVID addendum to this. But I would say, because this is so important to us, yeah, you think it's important to you, it's honestly important to us, every minute counts. So if it's a physical interview, there is no such thing as a wasted minute. In my place, anybody who meets prospective candidates is required, if they have anything to say, to send a quick email by 2 o'clock, which we then collate. We then have the wash-up discussion, and we try and only an exception exceptional circumstances will we not offer a post that evening. There may be clarifications, but we would probably have made up our mind. So how do you deal, for example, when you walk in and talk to a receptionist? Often receptionists are highly skilled people who happen to be receptionists because it works with children's holidays, and they may have had careers elsewhere. They bring a shed load of skills. How do you deal with somebody who you perhaps don't think is going to be involved in that selections process? If you're offhand, rude, that's probably not a good message to talk to. If somebody comes up to you, possibly a native speaker, has a quick chat in the target language, that's not them being friendly. That's working out whether you've got a cultural knowledge, what your accent's like. Okay, we're pretty reasonable. That will be part of the interview. And generally we invite people to have school lunch, probably because they might want to refuse the job, although hey, all school lunches are good. But all of that conversation is listened to carefully. You'll meet other members of the department. So really there is not a missed minute. There will be things like, usually in our case, a set of 4 20-minute interviews, but that will vary. You could have a single panel, there could be governors, there could be pupils. So there's no such thing really as a standard format, but don't think that the grilling, why do you want to be a teacher, serious questions, and if you're on your best behavior for just that, then I pay particular attention to how people perform 3/4 of the way through the day. Because like normal teaching, they're tired, they've had to think hard, they can't yet see the end of day. The last 5 minutes, everybody wants the job and they're your best friend and they've had a great day. Yeah, not quite the same 3/4 of the way through the day. That's what is going to be like 4/5 of the way through the term, can't see the end. How you're going to deal with kids is probably what you're like then. And if you're up and running and chirpy and chipper, that's probably a good place to be that. Another thing to say, and again, it's about the right, you may be disappointed because you don't get a job. Remember, there will be a jigsaw. There will be a jigsaw in the department. If it's a very young department, they may want somebody with a bit more stability, with perhaps some teaching experience before. If it's a fairly mature department, they may want somebody with some good young ideas who's happy to do some clubs and get things going. So you may actually be the best teacher, whatever that means, on the day and still not get the job because you don't actually tick the boxes. I would have to say, I'm sure you'll know through PGC, through SCIT, the ability to offer a second language to a low level makes timetabling much easier. So if you can offer year 7 beginners bottom set something, we wouldn't necessarily have a bottom set in year 7, but if you can do that, that means I can use you in that column of the timetable, and therefore that's really useful. And getting that language to feel confident about just enough to do a beginner's class is really worth it. Native speakers and very good linguists often overestimate the level that is required. Really, those people who are on PGCs, etc., what you're learning to do is to teach, not necessarily to be a fantastic background encyclopedia. Obviously, we really want enthusiasm, confidence, cultural knowledge, but actually sometimes it's just a tough, and it's can be quite hard. Do we have this candidate who we actually prefer, but they can't help us with the timetable demands we have? Or if we can, we've then got to make another jiggle. Or do we have this person who actually is a better language fit, but possibly less right for us? So those are difficult things to go. Let me just see where I'm. Yep, I think that's it. So let's just try and apply some of that stuff to what it might be like in a COVID world. So most school interviews are probably going to be on Zoom, maybe Teams, and it's worth having a practice. So if you're going to share a screen, just that you know how to do that, because somebody who's obviously at ease with with ICT is obviously going to be an asset because that's what our teaching looks like. So that's going to be good, feeling confident. Think carefully about your background. It's surprising how often people don't. We would never trawl on social media, but it's quite interesting looking at what people have chosen to show us or have thought wasn't important in the screen. So your call, but actually just think, I happen to have this fairly randomly because I use it in my teaching. It's a good starter activity. You get kids to, I describe this picture, they have to draw it, then I show them the picture. There's a lot of basic classroom vocab here. Okay, bed, maybe not, but then you can explain that at the beginning. But that's why it happens to be behind me. And also, actually, the back of my sitting room is actually pretty boring. So there we go. Right, so back to the COVID stuff. It's going to come in all shapes and sizes. You may teach a sample lesson to a couple of teachers. You may teach it to a reduced classroom. Frankly, because you don't really know the kids or in a position to build a rapport, and it's quite hard to do that, especially across Zooms or Teams or whatever, really you can teach quite a bad lesson and that won't be the nail in your coffee. What is really important is that if you did teach a bad lesson, you fess up and you're clear about what went wrong. So you are probably given less information than would be helpful to really pitch it there. So it might be year 8 food or something, but actually, you know, saying that is asking a lot of you to manage even a small group of people online. If you think that was a great genius lesson, they must have got a lot out of it, and it wasn't. That's the biggest alarm bell. We can accept a bad lesson if the rest of you is okay, because it's just such a difficult thing to do. So I think that's probably as much as you can say, because so many things will be COVID dependent, and different schools will have different ways of doing things. The next chunk, and again, I'll flash up this screen, but is really things, I'm avoiding using the term interview questions. Okay, and so these are, as we were saying, set of questions that, no, questions is wrong, that things you should think about. And if I gave you the inside line about some question, that is sharp practice. It's going to help you get a job against somebody who might be better. That doesn't help the school. So these are areas that are, let's say, a number of these would come up, I would expect to come up in an interview, and ask yourself, if they don't ask you some of these things, yeah, what are they talking about? Because I'd be pretty interested to know that, yeah, if there weren't a smashing of some of these things, well, that's a pretty weird school. Okay, first one, as with any job interview, you know, why do you want this job? Why do you want to teach? And I'll gloss over that immediately. Okay, more language specific. First thing is approaches to target language. Secondly, what about grammar, and often how those two mesh together. Obviously, assessment is going to be there. Perhaps promoting speaking as being the most stressful skill. What about promoting modern languages in general, given falling numbers? Are you prepared to willingly go on trips, perhaps even run one in the near future when that returns? Are you happy to run a club? What sort of club might that be? What sort of extracurricular might that be? How would it work? Obviously, and my apologies for lumping all of these together, but in a way there are things. But so this is crassly put, it's to do with speed. Differentiation, SEN, GNT, EAL, and obviously those are things that are essentially to do with differentiation, and that is going to be absolutely key, and it'll come out if they haven't asked you about that in some format. Well, more fool you, I would say, if you take the job. Use of ICT, obviously, what's been working well, what hasn't been working well, anything you recommend, what's worked on Candid, what's your approach, what universities have been doing for some time, and indeed things like the police force, which is blended learning. How do you think COVID is going to change what happens in the modern language classroom in the future? Some sort of professional awareness. So I'm delighted that you're here with ALL. Just knowing about that as the body, maybe having a look at something like the literature blog, any number of the good resources on the ALL website. If you think you might want to go into independent school, at least the existence of ISMLA, which sounds like Hizbollah, but is Independent Schools Modern Languages Association. Generally, you should have some sniff about what's happening to exams. So you obviously know Ofsted, CIE cancelled IGCSE today, Pearson did it yesterday. Issues about grading, yeah, and grading difficulties, perhaps compared to other subjects, what Ofqual has done to remedy that. The trends of modern languages, what's happened to German, Spanish, French. Very good source of that information is the British Council Language Trends Survey. If you look at the executive summary, it's a good quick read about the state of play. What about the EBAC? And in particular, modern languages is the one subject that hasn't been taken up widely by schools, and the government will be looking, I think, to change that. What are the trends in modern languages? Just what's happening? Then these are some questions that are often people answer with a generalization. And these are questions that are almost always asked looking, tell me about the time when. So what I want is a specific answer to this. I want the time, 3 weeks ago when this happened. So something like, could you talk about a classroom management issue? Yep. Something about a lesson that went well. Yep. That kind of area. Can you think of a time outside teaching when you've had to deal with a difficult young person? And on the back of that is going to be how you deal with it and what did you learn from it? I personally would tend to, since interviews tend to be timed and there'll be a time allocated, I would tend to avoid any questions at the beginning of the interview. They want to get on with the interview, they'll want to see you teach, they'll want to get on with it. And say, if they say you've got any questions, they'll say, no, but perhaps if we had time at the end, I'd like to ask you a couple of things. Nobody wants to have a time wasting question. If it's an asinine question to something that's on their website, that's just a waste of time. Talking of what's on their website, have a quick sniff at their last inspection report, what their mission statement is, maybe a couple of things that you like the look of in school that you might want to be involved with. Top tip, you'll be assessed pretty much entirely on your teaching in your first year, and not whether you help out with lots of other sport, but actually doing something like theatre, a choir, helps you get to know kids better. It will reduce your stress levels. You'll get on better with kids who don't necessarily like your subjects. So it's better to choose that than be pushed. So think of something you actually really want to do and then maybe volunteer that at it, but be prepared to do it if they are going to offer you the job. I think those are the key things I'd like to stress. I think if there's one single point is that when you turn up on the day or on screen, that person had better be the same person that filled in all the admin online. And if it isn't, that certainly to me is deeply worrying in a profession where you are going to be. I took it as a given that you know about safeguarding, child protection. I cannot believe you got this far without knowing that. So I don't know if Stephen or perhaps Helen would like to pick up any things that might be in the chat, or if you would like to ask any questions. But actually, frankly, it's a Friday night. Well done for surviving in these times and this week. And happy to be contacted at other times. I would hate to get in the way of what's coming next. Stephen, are there any blinder questions? And if not, I'll pass back.
Not really. There were one or two specific questions, but I think they were addressed subsequently in your overview there. The one thing I was going to reiterate was what you mentioned about the content of the ALL website. So a lot of the ALL website is open to anybody, whether you're a member or not, but you see more obviously if you are a member. So specifically on the issue of online teaching at the moment, there's a lot of information on there. So shared advice from other teachers, as well as resources and support from corporate members. That's people who are making things, publishers and so on. A big area about what's happening in the exams and in speaking in particular. Those are all on the website for your information to drop into when you feel like having a look at it, really.
Sorry, Helen, I think that's the absolute key point. If you don't have an awareness of the wider languages community, and ALL and indeed ISMLA, but ALL is certainly a very wide-ranging one with lots of useful information. You know, that would be deeply worrying. You're going to devote your life to this career and you haven't bothered to find out what the community is out there. Helen, sorry.
Well, I was just going, do you want me to read aloud some of the questions that are here?
Judiciously choose, because I would hate people to roll their eyes as thinking.
Oh, we'll be very judicious. I do think, well, Sophie's comment is such a good one about how do you get a feel for the school if the interview is online? Any tips for this? Because there's no doubt about it, is that if you visit a school, if you're there, you pick up loads from just sensing how people are teaching, the the way that staff treat each other, the staff room. So I really feel for you on this.
Yeah, I think that's a really tough one. Just walking down a school corridor, you know, there'll be the head's office, there'll be reception, that will be nice. Just walking down corridors, looking at kids. How do kids barge into each other? Are they respectful? You can look at you can learn an awful lot by the way a kid looks at a teacher, what they think about the school in general. I think it's obviously the website is going to tell you something, but that is their best possible spin on everything, and that promotional video is more likely to be a reflection of how much cash they put into it rather than necessarily the true nature. I would start looking at any kind of school blogs. What are the activities the schools are doing with kids? I think it's if you want to learn a lot and get a great next job, really consider a challenging school. So just because a school is in some difficulties doesn't mean you shouldn't take that job, and it can be absolutely invigorating and a great testament to some great teaching. Almost you've got to find out if they're winning, if what the other staff are like. Okay, if they're just reading the TES in the common room, that's probably a bad place to go. But there are great jobs in challenging schools that will bring you on as a teacher tremendously, and it will be fairly tough. But again, I come back to, if you think your first job is going to be fantastic there. I don't have a genius idea. It is really, really hard, and boy, do you really want to know. I think you can learn something by the sensitivity and the interview process, but that's an extrapolation thing. You know, did you like the head of department? Is that a head you feel you can work with? And if you feel you can work for them, the chances are the kids probably feel the same as well. And, you know, a good head and a good head of department are pretty vital. And you can be a great teacher, but if you're working against a head of department whose hearts are not really in it, that's a worrying place to be. I'm sorry, there's no genius answer there. I don't know.
Stephen.
I'm just going to pause there a moment because we're running into Charlie's time now, really.
Right, okay, stop. Come run.
No, stop. No, listen, we can do that again. There are some really wonderful questions in and I think this is there are a lot of people that have come specifically for that. We can do my strip bingo another time.
I'm with you all the way. I'd really like to help you feel you can present the best of yourself in that you. you know, you may not be the right person, but at least you feel you gave it a good shot, and that will just be a good thing. Okay, crack on, Helen.
Right. So just really saying, and almost I would say, I thought it was a really good answer. There's so much on the web, and you can actually find out from the tone of a head teacher's letter to parents. Often if you go onto websites, you'll see the letters, and that sort of tone will help a lot. So we've got to think, really, that was the first question. One was about the fact that actually a lot of schools don't ask for a CV. Do you have anything to say about application forms?
Really, that's a more laborious way. What you should do is knock out your CV, then cut and paste into the application form. That's a way of, in a way, sorting out if you're a serious contender. That would be my cynical view, but pretty sure that's there. Why wouldn't they just accept a CV? Makes life easier for HR, it certainly speeds up. You've designed the form, it's a lot quicker to read through. You don't have to rummage so much.
Alex says something which I've heard this, well, we do this at our school as well. I've heard of teachers getting modern language jobs advertised for their second or third language, and then they negotiate courses from the school MFL budget to improve. What are your views on this? Is this common?
Sorry, can you say that again? I didn't quite understand.
Where somebody, I mean, your main language might be French, but still it's fine to go for a job in German, even if that's only your weaker second. Well, I'm saying, sorry, I'm already answering it. But somebody could well go for a job in their weaker second language and then ask for some form of training to get them up to speed.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. There are resources available to help with that. And really, are you investing as a school in someone who is as good as they're going to get, or someone who, with a bit of careful nurturing, will be fantastic in a year's time? Really, PGC courses are there to train you how to teach. And if you're a decent linguist and committed, you will pick up a language record. We quite often make a job offer to someone saying, the understanding is by the end of your first year, you'll be ready to teach up to year 7 or 8 in this language, and within 2 years up to GCSE. And if we put our money on the right person, they will do that in spades. But that's a condition. We say, 2 formal questions. Are you happy with the understanding you're going on 1 school trip a year and possibly run one in your second year? And what club would you like to run that's going to make the language department a better place? And if people say no to school, there could be very good reasons for that. Might be young children, but I'd rather have the conversation now than afterwards.
And I would recommend that from your point of view, you contact the school if there's, you almost don't want to waste your time or their time by applying for a job where actually you haven't got those skills. So it may be worthwhile finding out in the first instance, look, to be honest, that's not my first language, but I would be, part of it is schools love it if people are prepared to go on courses to improve their second language. So, and if I can just say as well, you said about having 120 applications, Nick, that is certainly not our experience. You know, I mean, I think you're in a very well sought after school. So almost if people are hearing that, just know that.
Okay, I was really.
But I'm only saying that to say to people, don't worry, do go for it, and know that sometimes you are in a position, if you like, of being able to bargain a little bit, because some schools really do.
If I give you a story of a different year, one year we had a field of 8 for a job. When we invited 6 to interview, 2 people had at best told untruths, specifically that the main part of their degree had turned out to be media studies, not a modern language, and was incapable of communicating in any sort of way that would suit our A-level. I don't even want to go in the other one. And so, yeah, absolutely. I was saying that to do with how a head of department and a team would really want to go through all of the applications, and that they want to pick out well-written content. It's all online. So letter application is it's just a cut and paste job, but it's effectively a letter. Part of the application will be a CV, part of the application will be so yeah, I would absolutely go for that. Just depending on when it is in the season, absolutely. That's not every job.
where else would you go apart from the TES? There's Caroline is saying
Well,
they charge a lot for ads. Where else should we look? Oh, and can I just put that also, what's your advice about agencies? Because you did mention about agencies.
well, no, agencies do a very good and useful job. The problem comes with an agency is when they want upfront cash for a job that has lots of applicants, and when they just do a generic one, and that can tend to be, agencies know their market, otherwise they go bust. So there is absolutely a place for them. Just think about what the deal really is with an agency. It's a bit, it's if a so in a number of schools I've taught in, we've used agencies extremely successfully. Full stop. Yeah, I think I would just be aware of what you're signing, and that if a school has to pay cash, but no,
that's the thing I was going to say. You're not going to get those of us working in schools saying go for an agency, because we've got to pay more for you. So, you know, in a way, there is a certain feeling, I think, amongst those of us employing to think, well, those of us, I'm retired now, but people who are employing to say, actually, you know, there's a, as Nick says, agencies are in it for money, to get more money. And so, yes, they're doing well, but it's not doing us any favors sometimes. And it is, sometimes you just feel, well, that's money that could have been spent much better.
I think the thing to do, what do you think an agency is really bringing you? And there may be answers there, but if you applied to us through a normal job advert channel there, TS is free online. So yeah, I don't see the problem there. There's obviously Guardian Jobs, there are other websites. If you've got a school next to you, keep there'll be a jobs page on their website, but you know, that just might be keeping tabs on the list. It's not stupid if there's a school that you really like that's next to you, just say, I really like your school, here's my CV, this is what I've done. And they should ask if they can keep that letter or email on file. But actually, you know, sometimes they'll keep good people. They should ask your permission to retain that. But it, you know, rather than advertising, a couple of people, just letters in the filing cabinet, whatever that looks like nowadays, might be useful.
And that might be something that, I don't know, Charlie and Judith might be able to say about where you recommend people look for jobs. I'm not sure whether Schools Week have adverts, do they? I mean, Schools Week, I think, is a really good magazine. So, by the way, Steve and others, if you want to chip in on other one thing is about, yes, how much of the interview is normally conducted in the target language? So sometimes people are concerned if it's not necessarily their first language, very comfortable in teaching Key Stage 3 or 4, but less so in conversation.
I think the one thing we don't want to do is to embarrass any candidate. And if it's clear that it's not working for them, so I'd almost always kick off with a really easy question. It's like the beginning of a GCSE oral, you know, it's comment t'appelles-tu is as much about checking you got the right candidate and and just so that something they recognize that, you know, that's not part of GCSE, but it's just kind of gets it on the recording as the right person. So honestly, what purpose is served by an interviewer embarrassing a candidate and making them feel bad, because that everything after that is probably going to be less well. So that I would hope there's massive sensitivity. Yeah, as a teacher, you get to know what they, you know, most subjunctive. My French and Spanish aren't perfect, and I survived perfectly well. So I don't think.
And can I say, this is a really good example of how do you know what the school is like that you're going to? Because if you've got someone like Nick saying this to you and taking that approach, that's the school you want to work for. So it's really, you know, and I think what you said earlier about the fact you've got to be honest as well. Be honest with the school. If it's not your speciality, say it, because the worst of it is if you don't confess to that and then it comes out that you're not very good at it. So it's being honest, really, isn't it?
And it is 10 times better to be with a newly appointed teacher who will tell you that there's a problem before you find out from somewhere else. So generally, if you're that sort of person who would try and sort out, say, honestly, you won't be able to solve every problem. But if I get it by the time when it's gone toxic, I think less well of you than if you told me, say, look, funny thing happened today. it may be okay, but I think you just ought to know that that is maturity. That's the sort of person we can really work with.
We've got one person saying that they did a lesson on Zoom as part of the interview, and they were told that differentiation and assessment were not good enough, but they didn't know how the students were used to being assessed and were not in a position to ask the school. They couldn't ask the school.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what was served by telling, by approaching it in that way. Had they said, had you thought about in real life how you might further differentiate, or what would you do next lesson? But, you know, answer, did you feel better or worse after they'd said that? And, you know, I bet you felt worse, and I bet it hampered the rest of your interview. And I would totally understand it. If that teacher had done that to a kid, I wouldn't expect that much, you know, goodwill for the rest of the lesson. Fair cop, whatever that school is, don't want to know the name, but yeah, better ways of interviewing people.
Yeah.
Nick, can I ask one? There's something that one of mine is, she's got an interview coming up, and they've just asked for a planning task or planning related written task. What's that likely to be online?
I'm not quite sure I understand what's planning related mean.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
Planning.
Okay, go on, Helen, top of the head. Have you got any
only that it's not top of that, because I did see it there and I was thinking, I wonder what that means. I just wonder whether it means preparing someone, how do you plan for a GCSE writing task, rather than just let's write it and let's see what your writing is like. I wonder if it's that, because that's what we do quite a lot of, don't you? You say you're going into the exam, you don't want to be under pressure of thinking, oh, how shall I do it? You've already thought about how you're going to plan for it. That was just came to my head. I don't know. Anybody?
Also ask yourself, what would the weakest kid in that class, if we didn't understand that, are they phrasing in class instructions like that to kids? And if so, what's happening to the bottom of their class? Because, hey, if, you know, I would ask for clarification. Say, can I just be precise what you mean? Do you mean, and then give some possibilities? Yeah. And my first reaction was, do they mean a lesson plan? That's a
they have asked for clarification, but it's for equity. It'll be released in the interview day. So I think they're probably still planning it. If I'm really honest, I think.
I have a lot.
My guess would be it's to do with the criteria. Say that you've got to have, I don't know, timeframes, tenses, intensifiers, infinitive constructions, connective, whatever it is. How do you train them to be able to include it? That's what my guess.
Cool.
Absolutely no problem with a very late. We deliberately give our candidates teaching tasks very late, so everybody gets the same amount of time. And also, we're quite suspicious of people who find something on the TES, which we usually find, and talk and chalk their way through something. Actually, don't use PowerPoint as a crutch. We want to see you teach, not like, what did you use as a cut and paste exercise?
I think we've covered everything, haven't we?
There's one there about languages of French and German, not as many German offers at the moment. Is it worth applying to jobs for French with Spanish as a second language, just as an opportunity to just take on French classes?
I think if they've asked for French, I think you can learn a lot by what they've said in the job, what they're asking for. So is it French with Spanish, French with some Spanish? And that wording is almost always very carefully gradated there. And sometimes it'll be French with another language. An opportunity to teach a second language would be valued. So there's a whole very minute hierarchy of what's being asked for there. You can always I would send them an email. What sort of school wouldn't send you back saying, no, this is if they're not going to reply to a pretty decent one-liner email saying, very interested in your advice, like your school, I've only got this, is it worth me applying? And, frankly, if the school doesn't give you a decent answer there, and expect a short answer,
And perhaps if you like the school and want to go there, at the same time, you say, I would be very interested in learning Spanish to be able to teach it, you know, so that you're showing you're aware of this, but also you're willing to learn the Spanish. Because I'll be honest, anybody with German now, it probably is in your interest to be looking at other languages as well. Let's hope it turns the corner at some point. I realised that our school, we were looking for people with German anyway, so some schools are still doing it, but
sadly, great language, lot to offer. It's all very well saying what a good language to learn, but if you look at some top 10 of what language, then German is frequently sought by UK businesses.
Well, and we've just got people in the chat actually saying there are jobs there, and somebody even saying at our school we're about to advertise for a job. So that's really good.
Yeah, yeah. Don't give up on German, but if you're in a having to learn a second language and you've got both German and Spanish, look, it's your call. If you culturally feel aligned to Germany, fantastic, go for it. You'll probably make a better teacher. Remember, we're absolutely after, if we're investing in this teacher, we would hope they stay with us for a number of years, by which I mean 3, 5, 7, and go off to an even better job somewhere else. So we're prepared to have some flaws. You know, there's no such thing as a perfect candidate. Well, few and far between. Everybody's got something that they're less good at, but that doesn't mean say you still won't be a great teacher and well respected and liked by the department and the school. Stephen, I noticed you signaling at one point. I don't know if you wanted to chip in on an earlier point there.
No, I think I was just having a seizure. I wasn't really signaling.
You've been in teaching too,
yeah. Charlie, other people, have you seen?
Yep.
Yeah, I think
open up your mics if I've missed anybody, but I think we seem to have covered a lot.
Yeah, I think there's some great stuff in the chat. We'll be saving the chat as well, won't we?
Yeah.
So yeah, there are.
Can I just say, blow your own trumpet. At my first interview for a main job, after I'd finished faffing around, the head said to me at the end of the interview, for heaven's sake, you've got to learn to blow your own trumpet, girl. Because there were all sorts of things which had come out through my references that I never, well, my answer to him was, it looks as if you're showing off. Sorry, no, you've got to learn to blow your own trumpet, really. Say what you're good at. Yeah.
And by the same token, I think that speaks very highly of you, and they probably think more of you for actually having slightly underplayed it. Sometimes with career changes, the cut and paste from a corporate world is, you know, I'm in the top 10% of something, is not going to play. If you're going to speak like that to kids, that's not going to be good. So I think allow them to see that, and I think certainly an amount of trumpet blowing is right, but just don't go the corporate end of it.
Yeah.
Well,
one more piece of advice, actually, which springs to mind. I've made a few notes, but somebody once who was a super teacher, when they came for interview, apparently told the head in the interview that they could teach both languages to A level. Now, the fact is, yes, they would be able to ultimately, but they hadn't taught the second language for Lord knows how many years and hadn't spoken it, actually. And it so happened that the following year, the following September, urgently, we needed someone to teach that language at A level because we hadn't got enough people to cover the timetable. And the head said, oh, no problem, so-and-so can do that. And it was chaos trying to, but, you know, said person said they could do it to A level. And I was saying, well, I know they can't, you know, they really need to start it at year 8 and work through, and they'll be absolutely fine ultimately, but admit that you're rusty if that's the case, and the school will accommodate you appropriately.
I think a willingness to improve is vital, and an openness to be receptive. Yeah, absolutely. The timetable is king. it shouldn't be, but actually it's about, we have a limited amount of resources, if you like, salary, cash, number of hours, number of classes just have to be taught, and that's got to work.
Okay.
Okay, everyone is now falling asleep, I think.
Good.
Not for any other reason than they're exhausted. Thank you very much for staying on, Nick, and giving us the benefit of your experience.
And others.
And also those of others who've been involved this evening. There's a lot of thank yous just starting to appear in the chat. So thank you very much, everyone, for coming along. And we do hope to see you again at another event. There's lots of events on AWL London webinar website as well that you're welcome to. But these events happen on the first Friday of each month, and they normally take the format of some input, some update, and a little bit of social activity that you might be able to replicate in your classroom too.
And it's all right for me just to say as well, I think that this worked really well that we linked with ISMLA on this, because this is, Nick is a member of AWL and a member of ISMLA, and that's the ideal really. That, and Kevin also is a member of AWL. So I don't know whether, Kevin, you want to just say something about ISMLA, because I know that this is a joint event.
Well, I did add in the chat, I put a couple of links in, Helen, in the chat, but I did say that Nick is, of course, a distinguished former chair of ISMLA. So it was great to hear Nick this evening as well. But no, nothing really to add there. Just if people want to have a look at the website, I also put up the YouTube channel link, which we've got a few webinars there, which have gone down very well with our members and guests. So yeah, please feel free to have a look.
Brilliant. Lots of thanks in the chat for you, Nick. So thank you.
Have a read. Thank you. Well,
Yeah.
You've been called precious in the chat just now, Nick.
Oh, so true, so true. Yeah.
That could go in your next CV.
I'm hoping to be called terrible, but not terrible.
And I have to say, as ever on these Fridays, it's a very slow and long goodbye, but in a lovely way, because people kind of just want to hang out. And as one of my trainees said to me the other day, it can be quite lonely, can't it, being on the other side of the screen. So these Fridays have become kind of quite a bit of a fun evening, even if we are all, sitting in our own living rooms. I've gone to Lowry now. Have you noticed? I was inspired. I've gone to Lowry. So I thought Nick had. I did a Turkish lesson the other day, Nick, using that backdrop. Which, Rachel Hawkes's, I think it is, learning the Turkish words, and such a good picture to do that with.
Yeah.
Just put there, if you'd like to open up your webcam now, just for us to see you before you go, that would be nice if you're not too shy. Shall I stop recording now?
Yeah.
Helen, you've actually put, please do poke your webcam. I think does that mean you have to put